I don't really know what to say with regards to Amersham. I suppose you have to work with what you've got. I think, and there are some pushes towards buying out of PFI contracts in other parts of the country, because they are so disgraceful, that that might be the only way forward.
I just make a point is that there's a gentleman at the back, and then I'll take yours, and then time's getting on. Is I would point out, Dr. Gamble, that the fact that you've raised the PFI issue and that the NHS in Buckinghamshire would find it very difficult because of the PFI in Wycombe. But why are the NHS building another PFI extension at Stoke Mandeville? Doesn't make sense. So the argument, I'm sorry, I don't feel is valid, but that's just my point of view. Councillor Collingwood.
Yes, good evening. I'm Alex Collingwood. I'm the local councillor for this area of Marlow. I actually use the M4 fairly frequently. I use the M40 fairly frequently. Interestingly tonight, between Junction 5 and 10, M4 is closed and gridlocked again. So the first question is, in terms of practical terms, lovely conceptually, lovely bit of mum's apple pie, but you're never actually going to get to it because actually the M4 can be permanently closed and permanently gridlocked anywhere between Heston and Reading, basically. So the question is, the M9 is lovely, but you can never actually get to it. Even us local ones will probably struggle to get to it. But the rest of the public, the 750,000 who want to get to it, won't get there because the location is chosen. So I'm curious of why you chose that. Is it because it's the only green belt piece for land you want it? That's my first part of my question. The second part is who pays for it. Yes, the PFI is very interesting, but even your housing numbers and your housing valuations. I actually work for a bank as a real job. I actually am a councillor as well, and I actually work for a bank up in the city. You were being very optimistic and rose-tinted glasses about paying for half of it. How has the Treasury reacted to your proposals? Because ultimately, they're the ones that are going to have to find the money. NHS, to be honest, will huff and puff and then chicken out, as you say, because they'll go, we can't afford it. So the people you've got to actually convince is George Osborne. So I really want to know what he thinks of this. Because if he says, forget it, there's no point us wasting our time on it. The third piece is local infrastructure. Because our schools are full, our roads are full, both where you are, in terms of your constituency. So I've got friends who live in your constituency, I've got friends who live in the working constituency, people live in Marlow, people live in we are all full. We are a victim of our own success. All of our schools are full, so you have to build a large number of schools. Even for every 350 odd houses, you have to build new primary schools. We've said it's 14,000 new staff, or thereabouts roughly. That's an awful lot more schools, both primary and secondary. We're running out of physical land to build on, so I'm not quite sure. Could it not be simpler, actually, to redevelop Wycombe itself? Because on the M40, so it has the right physical links in terms of motorways, it doesn't get gridlocked the way the M4 does, and actually you've got an ageing building there that actually can knock down fairly quickly, apart from your physical private wings, you leave that alone. The rest of it, to be honest, is a 60s building, 60s technology. So actually, a better proposal would be redo it in Wycombe rather than Junction 9, because I can't see actually 500 million anything to go to.
We can't hear.
So, if I may, then, what Alex is suggesting is that it be built in Wycombe, which of course I think absolutely extremely happy. And I just would say that one of the reasons I've been asking Philip about Stoke Mandeville is it does seem if you start drawing Stoke Mandeville into this and Amersham, then obviously the centre of gravity moves north. And of course I'd be absolutely delighted if we redeveloped the Wycombe site or indeed built it somewhere else close to Wycombe. Well, of course I would. But this is, I'm afraid, why I'm equivocating slightly and saying, oh, back to clinical commissioning groups, because they've got to decide what they want to do with what we've got.
Okay, where can I start? First of all, show me a location that doesn't have traffic on it. Where do you envisage?
Wycombe is a better location than the one you suggest.
Of course.
The big block of M4 is much worse than, and always much worse than M4.
I mean, I think I'm trying ultimately, wherever you choose, there's going to be traffic problems, and think that's a fair point. Secondly, in terms of the hospital itself, being Wycombe, yeah, of course, I mean, I'd love it to be in downtown Bracknell. The reality is that Bracknell Forest has about 110,000 people living in it. I think I'm right in saying South Bucks is about 130,000 people. As I've said repeatedly, it's not actually 500,000 with respect. It's sort of 650,000, 700,000 if the literature is the sort of population you need. You don't have the population centre in Wycombe. And in terms of staffing it, yes, of course it's difficult to staff. I mean, that's a statement of the obvious. I understand that, but if you are consolidating your acute care onto one site, the staff will follow. And that's the whole principle of it. I keep bringing you back to the point that if you're going to get 650,000 people to a site, you want it to be on a bypass or a motorway, because by definition there are more lanes. And I understand, my God, I understand the desire to want to have the site as close as possible to wherever you are. I understand all of that. And, you know, what can I say? It's just not possible. If you're trying to appeal to 750,000 people, by definition, even in a populated area like this, it's got to be somewhere not close to about 650,000 of them. I mean, it's just the nature of it. I think that, you know, look, it's difficult. And the other fun thing is, if you consolidate, you get helicopters. So if you've got somebody who's properly sick, you fly with them. Because that actually is the most appropriate way to transfer somebody who's had...
Will it have a helicopter pad then? So that
yeah, of course it would have a helicopter pad. It can be stored at Whitehall from there. I mean, all of that is practical. It's a 70-year-old site. You know, that's all feasible. I think we just need to realise there are going to be fewer sites in the future. That's going to happen. If there are going to be fewer sites in the future, irrespective of whether you vote Labour, Conservative, God forbid, or Democrat, you're going to see this happen. Okay? That's what's going to happen. And I just implore you to be realistic about where these sites can be and try to grasp the most attractive site for you as a community. I wish, as I keep saying, that this was almost taken out of our hands and some sort of clever bod sat in the DOH and looked at the population density and looked at the transport infrastructure and made a decision. That would be the sensible way of doing this. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be what's happening. And I've just decided to do it myself, and I'm just trying to seek support in the process.
I'll take two more questions, and then, because time is pressing on. Yes, ma'am.
I just want any consideration has been given to visitors, because I think that's a very important part of the care of people.
Yeah. Sure, no, I think in terms of visiting, I totally agree. I mean, the question was about the access for visitors. I fully recognise that you would need a proper bus service into the community. If you're dealing with a big hospital, that becomes more viable because you've got more patient flow, so therefore you can have more bus services. So that also, I mean, the concept of needing bus services is backed up by the need to have fewer hospital sites. I think also parking, I mean, parking is notoriously difficult at every single hospital site. Try going to Wexham, it has the worst scenario, I think. Wycomb's pretty bad as well. Absolutely. So every hospital site has parking difficulties. If you were building a new hospital, you could foresee this issue. You could have multi-storey car parks, subterranean car parks, etc., 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 and the extensive bus service. This is what you can do if you start again. If you have a plan that is sustainable and thought through, you can foresee the difficulties instead of having a situation where you have infrastructure, where you have to keep making it up and making do. And we all know what that's like. It's far from acceptable. And ultimately, the best treatment option for a sick patient is a visit from somebody they love. And I think we need to provide that, make that provision in the process.
Yes, you've only got to see the problems relative to the transport that there is at Stoke Mandeville. We do have hard evidence of where people, older people, because they're a bit frail or whatever, are not keeping appointments at Stoke Mandeville because of the difficulty getting to and from. And that's a burden which has been placed on Wycombe and Marlow area by the moving of services and facilities to Stoke Mandeville. Gentleman down the front here.
My name is Mike Williams. I'm from Marlow Bottom. What worries me is that I don't have a medical background or an aero engineering background. I spent all my life in systems engineering, and the point about systems engineering is it has to take account, if it's to be successful, it has to take account of all of the parts of the system. Now, most of the questions for the last half hour, for instance, have alluded to this problem, but I don't see any solutions. For instance, one of the reasons why Stoke Mandeville is such a hated place as far as we're concerned in Marlow on the bottom is because nobody bothered to look at the transport of how you get there. Not just the existence of buses, but I mean, they've chosen the worst piece of road in the whole counties, and that's a problem. There's also the problem of what I would say some social caring that the lady here referred to just now. It's important that you're not just treating the patient, you're treating the patient's family. That's got to be taken care of. Worries me that Dr. Lee's plan might just end up being an island of clinical excellence, an island which is isolated from everywhere bar Marlow and Maidenhead. But I mean, the people in, as Steve is saying, people in Wycombe are not going to be impressed with it unless something is done about the infrastructure of transport, of sort of visiting, of buses, of roads, and all of those things, as well as, of course, things like where do you house all of these 14,000 people? And to say that the people will follow the work is ridiculous, because in fact they can't unless you've got the sort of housing that those people can afford to buy or rent. So, I mean, yes, of course the consultants will follow the work, of course they will want to be in a teaching hospital where they gain a lot of sort of kudos and so on. But the poor chap who's sweeping the floors, who's emptying the bins, etc., and there's hundreds and thousands of those people, they've got to have that accommodation made for them, constructed in some way. It's all of those sort of things which will make the system work. And it's no good having an excellent hospital stuck in an island which people can't access. I know we're okay in Marlow, it's easy enough to get along to Junction 8, 9 and so on. But where are all these workers coming from, etc.?
Okay, I mean, first of all, if I'm sick, I want to go to a place of clinical excellence. Secondly, community hospitals deliver the holistic, compassionate care that you allude to. If you're really sick, sir, of course, being holistic and compassionate matters, but I want the best people.
Yeah, that's
okay,
fine.
so in order to have that in the best location, with the best facilities, you need a new hospital. In terms of the compassionate care and the provision of care, this is what's happening, is that a lot of this care is taking place in the primary care setting. A lot of people are being cared for actually at home. I mean, let's go beyond the community hospital setting. A lot of care, like provided by district nurses, who I've never met a district nurse who hasn't impressed me. District nurses provide wonderful care in the community. We have hospices, incidentally hospices that are not funded by the state. Hospices that deliver some of the best care that you will encounter in this country, not from taxpayers' pockets.
But where is all the coordination of all these facilities?
The problem, you're right, there is a lack of coordination, which is essentially my broad point, is that there's no one who's come to a conclusion of the strategy of the very best way to provide care in all of its forms to people in the community. And what we end up doing is sort of, making do with this and patching that together and trying desperately to work within a system that is not fit for purpose. I agree with you. I think someone like yourself looking at this and going, well, what are the systems here? What do we need to get in place to provide the care? Is an appropriate approach. But I would suggest that if you were looking at the healthcare economy of Buckinghamshire and Berkshire at the moment, I suspect you'd give up. Because the system is just so complex. I haven't even mentioned the mental health care provision. I mean, please, if ever there was a Cinderella speciality in terms of the amount of attention it receives and the amount of funding it receives, it is mental health, something I feel particularly strong about. What do I have? I have a god-awful PFI situation of a hospital at Prospect Park, and I have to deal with this because that's the legacy I inherited as a member of Parliament. I look at the way in which mental health services are provided in Bucks. I can count on one hand the number of times I've spoken to a psychiatrist in 10 years of clinical practice, because most of the mental health care is provided by GPs. The GPs struggle to provide it, not least of which because a lot of them haven't had psychiatric training themselves in the past. There's a lot wrong with them, and I'm not being foolish to think I can sort it all out in one go, and that my project is, you can imagine, the panacea that somehow, suddenly at the end of it, we're going to have this perfect system. But I'll tell you what, it will be better. It will be a better level of care and a better provision of care. And that's why I'm so passionate.
Can I make one very brief point to this viewing? Just, I'm systems engineering, I get all that stuff, and I get the argument. But equally, I'm aware, because I just popped along to St Bartholomew's, it's one of the UK's very greatest hospitals, but it was founded, as I just checked, in 1123, and it has evolved over the course of nearly 1,000 years. So I do think it is possible for hospitals to evolve and be fantastic.
Well, I'm not denying that, because it's got to be done within the systems concept. That's why I'm saying.
I mean, I come back on that. I mean, I understand that, and Bart's is great, and there are others, but wards, hospital wards, this is an anachronism, to be honest with you. In an ideal world, we'd have private rooms. Okay? We don't have private rooms because of the inheritance of the past, and because we apparently can't afford it. I would like this new hospital to have a large number of private rooms providing care. I wouldn't want any mixed wards, of course. I would want, if you were going to have bays, they're going to have fewer patients in. I mean, I used to go on to some of the old Victorian wards at St Mary's as a medical student, and honestly, it was like this, and elbow to elbow. I mean, I remember once a lovely old lady discharging herself from Central Middlesex Hospital, saying, "They're all barking mad, I'll go home and die." And I sort of stood there chuckling, and I thought, you know what, that's actually quite a rational conclusion to the situation you find yourself in. So I hear what you say, Steve, but and it is possible within certain buildings to be able to sort of enhance the service and improve things. But ultimately, in an ideal world, we know now that the structure of our hospitals are not conducive to the very best provision of care. If we know that, and if we have the opportunity, and we do, and I stress this is a real opportunity, to build something that is the best that we can provide, why not take that opportunity?
Yeah, I agree with you, but you've got to take into account the transitional process.
Of course.
And I haven't heard anything in your...
I mean, look, all the hospitals are going to continue to exist until you flick the switch and suddenly the casualty department of the Royal Thames Valley is up and running. But I suggest to you that this is already happening because the casualty department of Wycombe isn't what it once was. There isn't a casualty department at Heatherham Hospital. Hasn't been for over a decade. Most of my constituents didn't know that. These things have been happening, and they're not easy. They're difficult. They're painful for some people because they have emotional attachments and they feel insecure. And the root of all of this is our sense of security. We all know that the older we get, we become more aware of the fact that things aren't functioning as best as possible when we're 21. And we all have friends who get struck down, unfortunately, with cancer or have unexpected heart attacks or strokes. And at that point, we all feel very mortal. We feel like life might come along and dish out some bad cards to ourselves. We're human beings. I understand all of that. I'm not somebody stopped being a compassionate doctor. I realise that this is difficult. honestly, the only way forward to provide the very best care is to take some difficult decisions. And I think it would be in all of our interests to make those decisions as soon as possible.
I'll take 2 more questions. The lady in the green at the back there.
I think that's the majority is not wanting to.
Should we take?
Can I suggest Terry instead? But if anybody wants to stay behind and talk to us, we'll just be.
Can I ask this question?
Well, there's a lady that asked first.
That's a fair question. The lady here, that's a nice question to end on, if you want to come after. She's just said how do we...
Alex Collingwood's last question about the funding.
Right, okay, the funding question. First of all, as I made very clear in the article and in the publication, and indeed in my speech, forgive me, I'm not in the business of valuing property. I made very clear, we gave sort of a spread of figures, as I recall, even, and I've actually had unofficial contact with a developer and pricing, and I recognise, maybe there's not £5 million there, but there's quite a lot of money tied up in assets that we don't need. And pricing how many properties you get on depends on the density of the load. It depends on whether you want to put on a dementia home, which we are in short supply of, whether we want residential homes or nursing homes, which we're in short supply of. There's a list of things that we can build in these sites that in the end would be cost effective to us as a nation. So the costing of it, look, it's 200, 300 million quid, my God. We spend £2.1 billion per week in the National Health Service. £2.1 billion per week. 300 million quid is not actually a lot of money in the scheme of things. And the final question that the ladies asked here is where do we go from here? As I said earlier, you need a grassroots campaign with things like this because there is a reluctance to take big steps in government. Trust me, there's a reluctance in Quangos and in NHS trusts and everything else to take big steps. And so if there is a sense of a groundswell of opinion of a large number of people, and I would say tens of thousands would be the sort of figure that you need to get to get enough noises across the region, then we can start getting people to think about this seriously. I'm open to any suggestions slightly different to what I've suggested. I'm not like closed off from it. But I think that we do need something consolidated, and I think we need to go there now as soon as possible, and I hope you're going to support it. We do have an online petition, I think, and I think, look, I mean, how I would look at it is that what Terry's done with Marlow is if we could replicate this across the region that's affected by this proposed plan, then I think we would be in a great position because the ability to be able to distribute information, to get people bums on seats, if you'll excuse me, really helps. And also all those people can then write letters in to commissioning groups and say, look, have you thought about this? Create some noise. What I'm doing is, I originally had an appointment with Theresa May and myself were going to see Andrew Lansing. And it was in the diary. Well, Andrew Lansing is no longer the just state now. So I am now in the process of trying to secure an appointment with Jeremy Hunt, who is the new Secretary of State now. And I will continue to make noise and put pressure. I've sent copies of my plan to every member of the Health Select Committee, to every constituent MP affected, which is Henley, Wycombe, Beaconsfield, Windsor, Maidenhead, Bracknell, and Woking. They're all aware of it. They're all supportive of it. Oh, sorry, and Slough. Not that she was particularly receptive. So I put it about, everybody knows about it, and I will keep making noise, and I will keep pushing it to centre, because as the gentleman at the back appropriately, I think, alludes to, I need support from the centre, if only to underwrite it. I don't think you necessarily need support from the centre as such to fund it, because the local health economy will support this hospital, because all the commissioning groups will then put their business that way. So there is undeniably going to be a need to be an underwriting in order to construct.
I would point out is that we are running a campaign for the new hospital. on 38 Degrees website, if any of you know what that is, or alternatively, if you've left your email address. And it's quite easy, you just put your email address, your name and your postcode, and immediately that's logged on and you will be kept in touch with other bits and pieces as well. So that's already in place.
But just quickly, I'm doing these meetings in other parts of the region. So this is the second one I did, one in Bracknell, as you would expect to do my own place first. And then I'm going to go to Maidenhead, I'm going to go to Henley. Wycombe, I suspect, I think is being planned, and Winton and Slough.